Here are 10 facts every wine lover should know about sparkling wines like champagne, cava, and prosecco. What labeling term commonly seen on sparkling wine indicates that the wine is dry with very little residual sugar? Brut. So essentially, when you see the term brut on a bottle of sparkling wine, it tells you that the wine is dry with 0 to 15 grams of residual sugar per liter. Extra brut, on the other hand, tells you that the wine is very dry with even less residual sugar than brut, about 0 to 6 grams per liter. But the lowest levels of residual sugar belong to the designation brut nature or zéro dosage, which tells you that no sugar was added at the time of final bottling, preserving the wine as dry as it was after secondary fermentation at 0 to 3 grams per liter. What labeling term indicates that the wine has obvious discernible residual sugar? Sec, which is used for French wines, or secco for Italian wines. Seeing this on the label tells you the wine is dry but with discernible residual sugar. Then you get demi-sec, medium dry, and abboccato, which are French, English, and Italian labeling terms respectively used for sparkling wines that are definitely on the sweeter side, possibly even best paired with dessert. Finally, the sweetest designations you'll find on a wine label are doux, dolce, sweet, and diabetes. Just kidding. In which two ways do the bubbles get into a sparkling wine? Forced carbonation and fermentation. So forced carbonation is used to quickly create low-quality, inexpensive sparkling wines, kind of like how those soda stream machines carbonate cool drinks. The second way is as a byproduct of fermentation, which takes place in a sealed tank, as is the case with Italian sparkling wine Prosecco, or in the bottle, which is how French champagne is made. What happens during fermentation is that the yeast munch on the base wine's residual or added sugar, producing alcohol and carbon dioxide as byproducts. With this all happening in a closed, sealed vessel or bottle, that gas is trapped and compressed within the wine, which is why you should never agitate or shake a bottle of sparkling wine before you open it unless you intend on losing half its contents. What is meant by the term base wine in winemaking? So the base wine is a still wine that is a result of primary fermentation. This is the wine that is carbonated to craft the sparkling wine. This happens either through forced carbonation for cheaper sparkling wines, or in the case of quality bubbly we love like champagne, through a secondary fermentation in the bottle. Base wines aren't quite like the table wine you're used to. They need to be dry, low in alcohol, about 10 or 11%, and high in acid to accommodate the flavors that are yet to come through further fermentation and lees aging. What 6 steps are taken to transform a base wine into a traditional method sparkling wine like champagne? Secondary fermentation, lees aging, riddling, disgorgement, dosage, and finally, bottling. So the base wine, yeast, and sugar are placed in individual bottles to kickstart secondary fermentation. After secondary fermentation is completed, the dead yeast cells, or lees as they're called in winemaking, start to break down, creating autolytic flavors like bread, biscuit, and toast. The longer the wine ages on the lees, the more intense these autolytic flavors. The winemaker then begins riddling or turning the bottles from their sides to an upside-down position, which, over the course of 6 weeks, moves the dead yeast cells into the neck of the bottle. At the end of this process, disgorgement is done. The bottle neck is plunged into freezing liquid to solidify the yeast sediment that's accumulated there. The crown cap is then removed to pull the yeast plug out. Charming. Then the dosage is added. The bottle is topped up with wine and typically a sugary solution, which determines its final sweetness. The bottle is resealed with that mushroom-shaped cork we're all familiar with and left to age further before released to market. We're halfway there. Remember, you can keep studying more flashcards like these in the Brainscape app, which leverages spaced repetition to help you swell your wine knowledge so much faster than any other learning or wine app. What 3 grape varietals make up the base wine of Champagne? Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and Pinot Meunier. All do exceptionally well in the cool climate that dominates the Champagne wine-producing region in France. What term is used for a champagne or sparkling wine when its base wine is a blend of different vintages? The term is non-vintage, or NV. What's the point of blending wine from many different vintages? Well, it allows winemakers to produce wines of a consistent structure and profile no matter how variable the weather conditions were in one particular year. The seasonal weather of a region plays a huge role in grape ripening and therefore the profiles of the resultant base wines. In order to balance out these annual fluctuations in flavors, aromas, and structures, winemakers will blend base wines from several vintages until they arrive at a base wine that meets the expected standards of Champagne as an appellation d'origine contrôlée, or AOC. The opposite of non-vintage is vintage champagne, which is only made in years during which conditions were optimal. When that happens, only the grapes that were harvested during the year are used to make the wine, and that'll be the year or vintage that's stated on the bottle. Which sparkling winemaking method, tank or bottle fermentation, is best for aromatic grape varietals like Riesling or Muscat? Tank method. The tank method avoids the development of yeasty autolytic aromas and flavors which would otherwise overpower the grape's natural aromas. The tank method is also more cost-effective because the wine undergoes secondary fermentation in large tanks instead of individual bottles, and filtration and disgorgement are done in mechanized big batches. This is why wines like Prosecco are usually a bit cheaper than French champagnes. What are Asti DOCG wines like? So these are fully sparkling Italian wines made from 100% Moscato grapes in the Asti method, which is a variation of the tank method. The key difference being that instead of starting second fermentation with a base wine, as is the case with the tank method, the Asti method starts that process off with grape juice to produce a traditionally sweet, low-alcohol sparkling wine. Having said that, plot twist, Asti DOCG regulations have been changed, lifting the limit to the alcohol percentage of the final wine is allowed to be, thus enabling for drier styles of Asti. Also, official production methods now allow Asti Metodo Classico to be made, which veers away from the traditional tank fermentation method, allowing Italian winemakers to craft bottle-fermented Asti, although the requirements state that they must spend a minimum of 9 months on the lease in bottle.
That's the end of your 10 flashcard study round. You can find hundreds more questions like these in Brainscape's collection of wine appreciation flashcards, or in our comprehensive flashcard collections for the WSET and Court of Master Sommelier exams. And of course, keep listening to the rest of this hands-free playlist to massively level up your wine knowledge.